what follows is a conversation with Dr. John McFarland, an assistant professor of teacher education, the co-coordinator of the Single Subject Credential Program, as well as the Bilingual Authorization Coordinator at California State University, Stanislaus. Dr. McFarland, also known as Dr. Mac, is originally from Hawaii, where he earned his Bachelor of Education and Master of Arts degrees from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. He received his doctorate in educational leadership from California Lutheran University. With almost 3 decades of teaching experience, he's taught at multiple levels of education, including working 16 years at the same Title I comprehensive high school in Ventura County in Southern California. Dr. McFarland regularly teaches courses on working with English language learners, general methods courses, and supervises teacher candidates in the field. His research interests include the utilization of gamification in academic settings, issues of student motivation and engagement, effective uses of educational technology, and matters of equity and diversity in secondary schools. Our conversation centers on the topic of gamification of education, including how gamification differs from game-based learning and how certain strategies can increase not only engagement, but also equity and access to curriculum. I hope that you enjoy it and can take away ideas to ponder, discuss, and possibly integrate into how you teach. The following recording is intended for adult listeners. It may contain adult themes and strong language. This podcast is separate from my work or that of any guest with any public or private educational institution. It is my hope that the ideas expressed here can provoke thought and discourse and improve how humans are able to educate one another. I'm your host, Jake Schulke, and this is the Grand Unified Podcast, a production of Links Learning Labs. To support this podcast, please subscribe and follow on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us reviews and comments on your favorite platforms.
Luke, I am your father.
All right. Can you hear yourself in your headphones all right?
Yeah,
you hear it's kind of echoey and tinny a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Reducing the reverb in the room with some acoustic panels and stuff will help a lot.
Okay.
And then expensive noise canceling headphones will help a lot. But being in believe it or not, I've gotten the reverb in the room down quite a bit just with like curtains and the bookcase.
Okay.
So I've got some foam panels for the walls and stuff to put up that should.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot.
To turn it like full on legit, man. Like this is a full on studio.
I want it to be.
Yes.
I hope that it can be that.
Yeah.
I hope that it can work and
all right. We need to crack this bad boy open.
Absolutely.
All right.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just spent a wonderful dinner solving all the world's problems.
Absolutely.
I think there's nothing left to talk about.
I would absolutely disagree. We're just getting started, my friend.
Just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Put that out of the way.
How close am I supposed to be to this?
Where you're at is good.
Okay.
Anywhere from about a fist distance to a hand distance is good. Further than that, it won't pick you up very well.
Okay.
So yeah, right where you're at. I try to keep mine like right about this distance
Okay.
here.
All right.
So feel free to move it around however it works.
Okay. Oh boy.
Yeah, it looks like your voice is coming over great.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Sounds good.
So, gamification.
Gamification. Yeah.
What does that mean?
What is it? Who wants to do it? How do you want to do it?
I think I want to do it.
Yeah, okay. So here's a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. Where'd you first learn about it? Where'd you hear about it first?
Where did I first hear the term gamification?
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe you were the first person I heard use it.
Really?
I don't. Maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, I definitely, like, after learning a little bit more about what it means, like, I've definitely heard of some of these concepts before.
Okay.
But I don't know if I've heard it called gamification before.
Okay. So, I mean, gamification, even when I did my dissertation on gamification and kind of learned about it a few years prior to that. So I want to say, 2010. About 2010, I kind of started hearing about it. But I think it's been around for, maybe even a decade before that. And so gamification really is using game elements in non-gaming environments. That's simply what the definition is. Now, oftentimes people can get it confused with game-based learning as opposed to gamification. So, and I'd like to, tell people like, okay, game-based learning is really where you kind of take a closed system game, like Monopoly. Okay, let's just take Monopoly for an example. And you're going to use that as an economics teacher, and you're going to teach particular objectives or goals using that closed system game, and having your students actually play the game to make that objective and goal come to light.
Okay.
But then once they're done, it's done. You put it away. You don't really think about it anymore. So you used a game in order to meet a particular goal.
Okay.
Gamification, on the other hand, is actually weaving those game theoretical elements of what makes a game into one's framework or curriculum, and it's woven throughout. And so it goes on longer. It lasts longer. It can be, it's not closed system, and it can be as simple or as complex as you really want it to be, which is cool. And so that's where I love the concept of gamification. And again, having done quite a bit of research in the field of gamification, when I kind of started looking at some of that research, a lot of it was really geared towards higher education and also linked to the use of technology strictly. And I kind of saw that there are so many opportunities for gamification to actually happen outside of those contexts without any use of technology. And we can do it as early as kindergarten. It doesn't have to be just in higher ed. And so those things I kind of wanted to bring to light. And so some of my research was actually going out and finding teachers who are actually doing it. And they just didn't realize, some of them didn't even realize that's what it was. That's what they were doing.
What would an example of that be? Like a teacher that was doing gamified learning but didn't know that's what it was?
So I had worked with one social science teacher, and who was, he taught 5 sections of social science in a 7th, 8th grade classes. And literally he taught the same class 5 times every day.
Okay.
And so what he wanted to do is just like, all right, I need to up the ante a little bit. So I want to try and create a system where the classes are competing against one another. For they're doing different tasks, or and so they're all earning points towards this greater goal. And for him, the reward in the end was a pizza party. Okay, so, and it was funny because and he was kind of explaining to me how he was weaving these different types of academic tasks, activities, assigning points as an incentive to these kids, but then they were also had that element of competition against one another, not in the same class but with other classes. And so from week to week they would be hey, this class is on top, or this class is getting there and they're going to overthrow. So those kinds of things were very gamified elements. This element of competition, the element of, incentivized point systems or the leaderboards. There was elements of safe failure. And safe failure is this concept. Again, if you play a game, oftentimes when you get on a video game, how many lives do you have? You got 3. If Mario and Super Mario Brothers, dies once, well, you can get another shot, okay? And you usually get 3 shots before the end of the game. So this idea that, hey, you can fail, but then you can just do it again, was a concept taken from video games applied to an educational space, which oftentimes we don't see happen very often. So this idea of redos, retakes, that's actually a gamified concept.
The fact that if you fail the first time, it's not game over.
It's not game over. And again, if you really think about it, which is so mind-boggling, is that for some reason, our educational system, when it comes to assessment pieces, have been like, oh, you can only do it one time and that's it. Really, where else in life can you say that it's literally one and done and you can't retake? You go to the DMV. If you fail your driver's license, you can do it again. If you fail the LCAP, okay, or if you fail, the bar exam and you want to be a lawyer, you can still take it again. For teachers, you take the TPAs. All right. If you fail those, you can take them again. It's not a one and done. So there's very few instances in life where it's a one and done. And kids are now, so they see that, hey, in my life, in my experience, I'm able to redo things. I'm able to learn from my mistakes and not get another shot to do it again. Do it better. But somehow they're told that no, you can't. When it comes to school, you can't.
Where do you think that comes from? Because it's so common.
Yeah. That's a great question. Our educational system, is fairly young here in the United States, in the sense that, we're going back, 200, 250? Okay. My math is pretty bad. Anyway.
But to have a country, like we're talking 250 years that we've even had a country.
Right.
But to have guaranteed public education has been a little more than 100 years, and in most places, much less than that.
Right. And so, the establishment of the educational system is very antiquated. And we're still following these very antiquated types of, foundations. And we're still expecting that our kids today, that applies to them. And it's not. It's not the same. And so I think nowadays, honestly, with the incorporation of technology, with social media, our kids, what Mark Prensky would say is that they're digital natives. And for myself, I'm a digital immigrant. Okay, so these two terms are pretty interesting when I looked into the research on gamification, because Prensky's idea was that, just because they're digital natives, they were born into a society, a time in the world where technology is everywhere and it permeates everything, that somehow digital natives have a more instinctive adaptation, and they're going to do better. They just naturally get technology. We now know that that is not the case. That just because you're born into a space or an environment where you are, exposed to technology doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be digitally literate. It still needs to be taught. And so, when we say digital literacy now, it doesn't mean that, when we see our kids, they can literally text without looking at their phones, right? They can Snapchat to nobody's end. They can throw out a TikTok, but that's not necessarily digital literacy when it comes to academic instruction and being able to manipulate technology in a higher order thinking level. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. So digital natives, they still need to be taught how to use technology properly and in what contexts. So, and digital immigrants like myself, so he would say that, because I was born into a time where hey, it's not always around me. I had to learn it, that I'm somehow not at that level of those digital natives. That's completely false as well, because you can learn.
Yeah.
So you just got to be willing to do it.
Do you think that coming up, being surrounded by technology, that the students might even be at a disadvantage in how they learn how to use technology to manipulate the flow of information in an intentional way?
I want to say that technology, I think it's safe to say that we need to look at the technology that's coming out today. There's pros and cons to it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not going to go anywhere. It's only going to get deeper and more robust as we're seeing about, the use of artificial intelligence and how, that has started to become much more popular, much more manipulated. It is a free game on that. It's just more of like, how are we going to use it? And so to answer your question, there are some negative aspects to that, right? But then there are also a lot of positive aspects. And I think it really depends on what side of the coin you are on. Like for kids, they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is going to make my life a lot easier. Yeah, it can. But because it's also creating jobs that have never existed 10 to 20 years ago, right? And they're going to have to learn to adapt to that. Well, on the flip side, older generations like myself, you know what? Now, again, we have to adapt to that. So for us, like, hey, this is a learning curve. But can we use it for positive? Absolutely. It's just, we can't be afraid of it. Mm-hmm. We got to embrace the fact that it's here, and it's all throughout society. Take cell phones. Okay. When cell phones came out and became so, popularized, every kid has a cell phone nowadays. We can either demonize it, okay, and say, oh no, you can't, have cell phones at all, and you can't have it in schools. And there are some schools that's the policy, the rule. Or we can say, hey, you know what? I recognize that it's here to stay, and every kid has one. So why is it that it's okay outside of this educational space, but as soon as you come into the classroom, it's wrong? You can't have it. Of course, there needs to be some balance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where educators are challenged with trying to find that balance, being able to walk that tightrope of, all right, when do I use technology? When do I not use it? And getting kids to recognize that, you know what? Good use of tech is not necessarily using it so that they don't work. Or, you know what I mean? They need to be able to manipulate it and understand it so that it's going to work better for them, but not so much so that it literally does everything for them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I've noticed with my students, a lot of them have now this presupposition that it will do everything for them.
Right.
They think every test question that a teacher writes, you can just type it into Google. Why would I learn this stuff when I can just type your test question into Google? Until you intentionally write a question that you know they're going to get the wrong answer to by just Googling it. But that's a tedious learning exercise with these kids to get them to realize that no, it's you have to be information literate to be able to decode what's coming through that computer screen. Like they think it's infinite wisdom, not just ones and zeros.
Yes, and that's the deal. Like it's really interesting to see how tech has greatly impacted the educational space, and how we as educators approach our content, approach teaching and schooling. I remember when I first, became a teacher in the early 2000s, content was king. And I could get up there and really just teach everything I wanted to, anything I wanted to, and not really have kids question me about it. That wasn't the thing. Of course, cell phones weren't really popular then. Internet wasn't as popular then. And so that was a huge, it was lovely. To be honest, I will tell you,
No doubt.
it was awesome. And then as technology gets more and more evolved and kids start to learn how to, utilize it more, then it changes the way that I started to look at my own instruction and teaching. Rather than being the sage on the stage, I became the guide on the side. Mm-hmm. Let me help you facilitate your learning. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to utilize tech, but in an intentional way to help you better understand the world you live in. And let's do this together. So, and I'm able to do that. So that's where I think educators can really we need to be open-minded and embrace the fact that tech is not going anywhere. It's only going to get more robust. How we want to approach it and incorporate it within our learning space, that's the question for each of us.
Couldn't agree more. I want to circle back to that social studies teacher, that example of
Sure.
gamification. They were doing some techniques that a lot of teachers have heard of doing or had the idea
Sure.
of done, or in our experiences in school, experienced as a student. Competition between groups,
Right.
Points and systems of leveling and stuff like that.
Right.
What does that do to the kids' brains when they're in a system like that? Where is it purely just extrinsic motivation? Is it fun? Like what's happening with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because I can maybe even speak from my personal experience of gamifying my own classes, with high school French. Okay, so I was a French teacher for many, many years, and gamified, once I kind of developed my own gamified system after 2 years of conceptually, creating it and building it, then I implemented it, and every year I kind of tweaked it a little bit. But let me just introduce Fantasy French. Okay, so Fantasy French was a gamified framework where there was incentivized points tied to rewards and a leveling up system. Okay, so every student would start at level 0 because, hey, in game land, you start at 0. You can only go up from there. Okay, so you earn enough points throughout the class through, interacting in activities, maybe assessments, or, just oral activities, all that good stuff. So all of the points that I had was still tied to my rigor, tied to my curriculum. It's just I had my kids log all of that. So when every week I would push out my grades, I would give them some time to kind of take a look at where they are, and pull out their gamified system, and then so it's a log that they had, and then they would kind of say, all right, I leveled up, okay, and every level would have a reward, and that was tied to it. So, and that was the simplest piece, okay. They could use it at any time. They can use that reward at any time that they wanted to. And what was cool about this was they needed to figure out how to game the game. What is it that I'm going to do as a student? How can I maximize, my points, or maximize my experience to make sure I do well? And how am I going to use my rewards to do it? Okay. So what's funny is, so that's the simplest piece. Okay. I even made it even more complex by incorporating avatars. Okay. So every student, because it was fantasy French, I also I was a Dungeons and Dragons guy when I was a kid.
Perfect.
So I kind of incorporated a lot of those elements of D&D into the system. So every student had an option where they could choose to be a ranger, a healer, a sorcerer, or a bard. Okay. And so I took some time, did a prezi, and did a whole introduction on what all of those characters meant and some of the characteristics of those characters. So for example, if you choose to be a ranger, it means that you have a really high constitution, that you can handle things, and that you're a fighter. Okay. And so there were particular specific rewards, or powers is what I called them, that you would earn as you level up. So not only do you have your general rewards, that was for everyone, okay? But now you've got specific rewards based on how you want to play. How do you want to play my class? Do you want to play it as a sorcerer? Well, at level 4, you can, and I had all of the powers listed there. And there were incentives and that were very fantastical. So, like say my level 4 sorcerer, once they reach a level 4, then it gives them a sight spell. And when they're reading this, they're like, what's a sight spell? And so I'm like, all right, let me explain to you. So every time that you have a quiz with me, you're going to come in and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to kind of get settled, kind of like review your material and prepare for the quiz. And then we're done. And then everything goes away and you take the quiz. Okay. Well, during those 5 minutes, let's just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use my sight spell. And so the sorcerer would come up to me at my desk and say, Dr. Mack, I'm casting a sight spell on you. All right. And now I show you the quiz for 1 minute. And you just stand there and you just soak it in. And so you get to see what's on there. Can't talk to anyone. Can't write anything down, but you see what's there for 1 minute. Then I take it away. And then oftentimes you have 4 more minutes that you can now, all right, I remember what I saw and I got that section. I'm good there. But this section, I'm a little not so sure. I need to review that. So that was a sight spell, for example.
That's such a cool tool because they think they're hacking the game, but you've really forced them to be metacognitive.
Right.
And you've primed them to go back and relearn information they've already been exposed to.
Sure.
It's in their notes.
Yeah.
But now they've seen the questions and their brain is looking for the answer, and so it's gonna make that connection even stronger in their mind, in their memory.
And what I wanted to also do in my game was to develop community. So, and in my gamified system, they can only earn points. I can't take them away. However, if they choose to use their powers or their rewards, they get it one time, and then it's gone. So then I sign off on it. So once I sign off on it, it means it's been used. You can't use it again. But part of the community building piece was where at the very early stages, early levels, hey, like my healer, you can earn extra lives. Well, a life would be like 2 points extra credit. And so maybe by like level 2, you've got 2 lives that you've earned. But you can't use it on yourself just yet. You can only use it for someone else. So building community was one thing that I really wanted to stress in my class, in the environment, so that I wanted them to work together. Because again, as we know, that's what our kids are going to need to do. They need to learn to collaborate. They need to learn to be cooperative. And I want them to also be able to help each other out when they want to, and if they can. So everyone had something very similar for the first like 2 levels, and they can only use it for other people. And then after like level 2, level 3, you can use it for yourself. Now, what's another thing about games is that you can bring into the system is, think about it. When you play when you just sit down and play a video game, if you were to go like a full hour on a game and not really get anywhere and not get any kind of incentive or reward within an hour, do you think you would stick with it?
No. I don't think
Many times you don't.
Yeah.
And so the incentive comes quickly in a lot of video games because they want to pull you in. They want to keep you playing.
Right.
But then eventually it gets harder and harder and harder to get those incentives, right?
Yes.
So first off, you start with, hey, those incentives come pretty quickly. They're very low level incentives, but yet they increase in intensity or they build upon each other, so they become much more powerful as you get higher in the level. Yeah. And but then it gets harder to get, and that's that game concept.
Okay, that makes sense. Like a lot of the like massive multiplayer, like
Right.
World of Warcraft, like
Right.
to level up from 1 to 10 takes so many hours of gameplay.
Exactly.
To go from 10 to 20 takes 10 times the hours.
Absolutely. And that's the concept.
Okay.
And so so the way that I would put it to them is like, you know what, the game is constantly going. You can engage in the game at 2 a.m. if you wanted to, with my content online or in, of course, when we're in class, right? But then the game is still going on online, outside of class. So I will give them opportunities to engage outside of class. Either I might throw them like, hey, here's a trap key for like a treasure. So if you are the first person to answer this particular question, or if you answer this, whatever, online, on our learning management system, for example, then you earn a trap key or whatever, So there's all these concepts that I would use to get them to play more. And again, I've had some pushback, of course. So I've got kids who are like, when I explain it to them, some of them are like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing since sliced bread. And then others like, yeah, I don't really play games. And so I'm like, okay, we're still in the class. You're still going to be doing activities, and we're still, working together. So you're in the learning space, right? They're like, okay, yeah, but I don't want to play. Okay, maybe a quarter down the road, same kid might come to me. Hey, so Dr. Mack, I got a C in the class right now, and I want to see how I can improve my grade. Oh, really? Okay. Pull out your sheet. Let's see where you are. Okay, you've got this many experience points. That equates to level 7. Literally, this is a true story. I had this kid, level 7. And I said, you've used none of your rewards. Turn to the other side. Oh, and you're a ranger. You have used none of your powers either. I said, you can use these on today's quiz. You can use this on the little project we got coming up. You can use this here. And like, you want to use it? He says, you mean I can use it all right now? Sure, just say so. Or do you want to wait till later? He's like, oh my gosh. It was then I saw the light bulb go off. And he figured it out. Like, shoot, I just needed to use what I already earned. That's the deal. And just learn how to figure out, hey, you know what? I mean, it's a very different concept, right? It's a very different concept. So it's not like he's sitting down and playing a game. That's what he was thinking. I'm like, no, the whole class is a game. Everything we do are ways that you can earn advantage, more experience points, moving forward. How much do you want to engage? That's it. And then I would get kids at some point, kind of I'm circling back to your question about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Okay.
And I would have kids like this one who kind of started off a little rough, didn't quite understand. Once he figured it out, now he's doing things for me, manipulating my content area or my content without me having to ask him to do it. Because now it's fun. And that's the thing, where a lot of kids will come into our classes, and certainly for, some of our core courses, English, math, science even, sometimes they don't want to be there. Right. And it's up to us to find those ways that we're going to be able to engage them. It's our job to motivate them, right? To find that dynamism and make that learning experience impactful. How we do it, it might be very different from teacher to teacher. Gamification is just one way to get them there.
It's, as you're explaining all these elements of when you gamified your French class, which doing this for world languages is awesome. I think that's really cool. I was thinking about how these things that the kids are noticing, that like, well, with every successful lesson or learning bout or activity, I'm gaining something, and it's a fake thing, whether it's a power or some points, or I'm getting closer to leveling up, but there's something gained every time I'm successful.
Right.
And that really is how learning works. Just our kids usually don't learn that until they're adults, if ever, that anytime you engage in the learning process, like there's something gained there.
Right.
So I think it's interesting to think about what might be going on in their brains. Are they building that understanding over time that like every time that I actively engage in a learning activity, something good is happening?
Yeah. I know, kind of diving into the research of motivation, there has been some, debate that using extrinsic motivators, like, tangible things that you can actually touch, feel, were not necessarily positive because they were very surface, and that is not going to build intrinsic motivation, which is the internal want, which of course every educator wants their kids to be like, yes, please love my content, internalize it, and just want to do more for me, right?
Right.
Every teacher wants that.
Sure.
Is it going to happen? No.
No.
Right. So there are ways in which we can start to increase that intrinsic motivation, getting them to understand that learning can be fun. And that's where it's really almost like you're tricking them psychologically, because you're giving them multiple opportunities to learn. But for them, it's not learning. It's, I'm playing a game. It's fun. Or like, oh yeah, I get to do this, and now I'm going to do that. And so I loved every single semester, because I would start my game over every semester. So you get to start anew, because then the kids would, and in a high school setting, you've got the kids for a full year, right? And so if you start the game at the beginning of one semester, at the end of the semester, it's done. And then you start anew. And so if they chose to play one way, they're learning from that and they're going to play another way, which was awesome. And I'd love to see kids where some kids, they would literally use their rewards and their powers regularly throughout because it just mirrored their personalities. Like I like things stable. I like, things moving along at a decent pace. I like to know I'm doing okay throughout. Others would just like, I'm going to save it all and I'm going to big spend, boom, at the end, and just dump. I'm going to reward here. I'm going to use my power there. I'm going to do this here. And it was like, all right. And I would literally sit with these kids and they're like throwing rewards. I want my power here. I'm going to add this here. And I'm like, okay. And I'm literally plugging away and they're seeing their grades right before their eyes increase, move and change. And that they're like, dang, man, this is a trip. So, and some people, some of my colleagues would say, well, that's still kind of an intrinsic motivator. Maybe. Now, how I did it with certain kids, and that's where I did more. So different kids, you've got different types of kids. You've got your kids who are like your AP kids, okay? Your GATE kids, where, the tangible rewards, they don't really care about that. They want to know, like, how's my grade going to be? I want the extra credit, okay? And then you've got on the other side, you got kids like, I want food. They'll do anything for a lollipop. I have seen seniors go out of their minds for a sticker.
I believe you.
Kid you not.
Yeah.
And they will, because it's fun. It's something different.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's extrinsic, but yet it gets them excited about your content. And they want to do more. Now, I mean, along with gamification is this concept of extra credit, extra play. And again, that can be a little contentious when you're talking to some educators, right?
Sure.
Some educators believe, like, I don't believe in extra credit. It's not a thing. It shouldn't be part of the deal. Well, my response to that is, why would you ever want to stop a kid from trying to do more for you? Why? And why not reward if it's good stuff and they're being creative and they're coming to you? And I literally have had kids use their art and then explain it to me in the content, and explain it to me in French. And sure, I'll give them points for that. Why not?
Yeah.
I've had others create songs, write music, because they were bards, and so they were going to actually play, and they would play a French song in front of the class. I had a dancer who did amazing stuff. She taught us all, like a ballerina. She taught us, ballet. In French.
Gave a lesson in French.
Yeah.
So she's having to expand her vocabulary, prove to you that she can learn specialized vocabulary, which you have not explicitly taught her in class.
Nope.
She can learn new verbs.
Yep.
She can learn how to conjugate those verbs appropriately, and create discourse, create written composition and oral composition. That's huge. Like, that sounds like probably what some of those world languages standards even say they're supposed to do.
Of course yeah. So again, if you really want to dive deep into the standards, of course you're going to be able to find standards that hit that.
Sure.
But again, it's like, I didn't have to ask them to do that.
Right.
They wanted to do it.
I think the reason, I know from my perspective, like, when somebody says extra credit, sometimes I cringe because I want to know what that means. Like, when you say extra credit, what do you mean? Are you giving a kid 5 bonus points because they clap the erasers for you after school, which isn't a thing that exists anymore because we don't have
Right.
chalkboards, but
Sometimes I wish we did. But
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Or are they doing some menial task? Are they helping you do something? Are they doing something that's essentially busy work or a fun craft? Or is it tied to their learning?
Right. And that's the key. You said it right there. If the extra credit is tied to academic learning and it's not just fluff,
Right.
and it's also hitting your content, and they're using their brains in ways in which maybe you didn't expect was going to happen.
Right.
They're bringing out the creativity. And why would we say no to that? And that's where the extra is above and beyond. So I look at extra as that. Why would I say no?
I think that's great. Because if they're proving that they're learning more through that activity or thing that they're creating, if you have evidence that, that student knew this content better after having done that than they did before, that of course they should get credit for that.
Yeah.
But that's different than, draw me a picture, clean off my whiteboards.
Right.
Whatever.
And then of course, if you've got, students who are really into art, okay, maybe they're going to do something artistic, but then still working within your content. Again, this is where, the sky's the limit when it comes to having students interact with your subject. Maybe it's not the traditional way. Maybe it's something outside the box. And that's what I've found. But can you teach math through cooking? Absolutely. I've seen kids literally create recipes and do videotape themselves doing a recipe as if like they're on a YouTuber, but they're doing it in my content area. They're doing it in French. And they're also doing the metric system. And then they're still doing all of that. Can you have someone who is super into science, then give me something that is, maybe even dress up as a famous scientist and then give a oral presentation on whatever it might be, but in the target language. Sure. Even kind of getting out of just French, we can see gamified elements in almost anything, any other content area you can think of. It can be done. So it doesn't have to be just French.
How do you think so those students that went through Fantasy French, after that class, having that gamified experience, do you think that it built anything in them or changed their perspectives on learning in any kind of way that was long lasting?
I do. It brought back the fun in the learning space. Being a teacher educator and working with, upcoming high school and middle school teachers, I'm not afraid to say, you know what? Learning can be fun, right? Bring that fun back in. It doesn't have to be so humdrum. And you can still cover your standards in a very intricate and really creative way that gets kids excited to learn. And that's the deal. I got them to, oftentimes when I had them in French 1, because of the game, they came back to me. French 2, French 3, French 4. Then I would even have sometimes kids who would skip a year or so, and they're going to take my French 4 advanced placement class again because they like the concepts. They like the learning space. Shoot, right on. Okay. So I think that's where, the gamified system can really work for educators who are struggling maybe with disengagement, with apathetic students, perhaps. But there are things that they can do. But again, I wrote a little paper on the top 10 tips to gamify. And there's things that, we got to watch out for, because each one of them I learned. I stumbled a lot. For example, that social science teacher I was telling you about. So at the end of the school year, and I had worked with him for a little while, and he says, shoot, I really think that one of my classes is going to reach my goal. And now I'm going to have to treat them to a pizza party. It's like, I got 30 8th graders who can eat.
Yes, they can.
And I'm like, okay, rule, do not promise them anything you cannot follow through with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, that also touches on teacher credibility.
Yes.
If you're going to promise them something, you better follow through, or you're going to lose that trust.
Yeah, good thing or a bad thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if you promise a consequence and that doesn't happen, they'll stop trusting you in a negative or positive way.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Thank goodness for $9 Costco pizzas for feeding 8th graders. My God.
Yeah.
Shout out to Costco pizzas.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how he did it, but he threw down a good $150, $200 on one pizza party for them.
Lucky kids.
They ate well.
If that's the investment though, for a year's worth of, gamified learning, that's totally worth it.
It's totally worth it, right?
Absolutely. If you're not using, daily incentives, like how many teachers spend that much on candy over the course of a year? $150, $200. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many of us don't spend that much at the dollar store
every
year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the Target back to school sale.
Well, and there's different ways that you can approach the gamified system. So I chose the theme of Dungeons and Dragons. It worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, even though some of my kids have never heard of Dungeons and Dragons before, because I'm an old fart, whatever. Okay. I know that D&D is now big online. Okay. But, they saw my enthusiasm. They saw how into it I was, and that in itself motivated them to oh, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. But then through the game itself, allowing them to be creative and for them to demonstrate their knowledge of my content in ways that they've never been able to do before. Now I've got them. Because now I'm allowing them to bring their own interests and incorporate into my curriculum. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is huge. If we can tap into those funds that the kids bring to the table, mm-hmm. Heck yeah, we're going to let them soar. And there's nothing that they can't do.
Oh, 100%. If you figure out what that language is for that kid.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You have to figure out, hey, are they buying what you're selling?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then another tip I've had, worked with teachers, I'm like, maybe bring in their perspective. Ask them, hey, kids, this is what I'm thinking about incorporating. This is what I'm thinking about doing. Okay. What kind of incentives would you like to see? Mm-hmm. What would you like to have? And what should those, at what level do you think it should be, So bringing their voices into it is also huge buy-in, because now it's like, wow, he's going to listen to me? He's going to take my advice and maybe implement it? Yes, I've done that for many of my students. And that's helped me become a better game master,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And I've been able to like really go deep with some of these kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That goes so far for the kids to feel like they have some sort of agency.
Right.
That they, yeah, for them to, that's it, for them to feel like they have control.
Right. Right.
And involvement.
Yeah.
In decisions and everything.
Yeah.
Because especially for teenagers, they just feel like the whole world's screwed up and I'm not in control of any of it and my whole day sucks.
Right. Right.
And then if they get to an environment where, even though it's a fantasy world, I'm in control of a lot.
Exactly.
And, or if it's, you know, control over what those incentives are or what the plan is for the winning team or, you know, let's take a vote. Do you want a pizza party, donut party, ice cream party?
Yeah.
You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Those little things go a long way.
They do.
Do you think that, so you were a D&D kid and a D&D adult.
Yes.
And then you created Fantasy French as an homage to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Do you think it made teaching more fun for you?
Absolutely. 100%.
Do you think that you having fun at work made as much difference in the kids' learning as anything else?
Yes. And I, you know, when I first started my game, it seemed like a lot of work. Okay. But then I got better at it and started putting more of the heavier lifting of like, all right, you know, I'm going to do my grades still like I normally do, but you're going to keep track of it, of where you are. So I would give them a little bit of time every week. And again, this was really kind of teaching them to be, you know, just be more organized, you know, to have that self-regulation, being able to like, all right, I'm going to see where I'm at in my scores, right? So I would give them a little bit of time, like 10 minutes every Monday. All right, log on to your computer. Okay, going to check out your scores in this class. You're going to update your sheet in this class. And then if you need to use any powers or rewards for whatever, you know, you can come see me now during that 10 minutes. And then often it wouldn't take more than 5 minutes, right? But then they got a few other minutes. I would say, okay, rather than you just sitting there, I want you to take a look at your other grades. See where you are. Yeah, did I need to do that? No. But I wanted them to understand where they were in their own learning process and also take responsibility. And so, yeah, kids would log on and like, wait a minute, I'm getting a D in biology? What? I was just getting a B 3 days ago. What happened? I'm like, that's a great question. Now I want you to make sure you go talk to your biology teacher, okay? Take some time to reach out to them. Maybe email them. Let them know, hey, can I set up a meeting with you? So I don't know. It's interesting how the gamified system allowed me to start integrating things that helped the kids in the long haul and made them think differently about their own education. And that I wanted them to advocate for their own education. And I would be the first one to tell them, I'm like, hey, you know what? If I am failing you, I want to know. If I'm not doing right by you, I want to know. Not every teacher wants to know that. But
it sucks to know that you suck.
Sure. But again, that is the only way that we're going to get better, is if we get that feedback, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it does kind of suck sometimes when they call you on it. And you're like, okay, but then, hey, let's talk about it. Like, how can I do better? Where did I go wrong in this game scenario here, right? How can I make it better? How can I improve it? And that, I think that was key. So it's funny, like when you ask, like, how did the gamification system kind of make me think about my own teaching, how it made it better for me? It did make it a lot more fun, a lot better for me. But it also, I think, made my kids think differently and allowed me opportunities to help them advocate for their own education because they deserve the best.
Yeah.
And not all, unfortunately, not all teachers are going to reach out to the kids to let them know, hey, you didn't do so well this time around. This is how we're going to be able to get it better. Our kids need to learn that on like how they need to be okay approaching the adult.
Yes.
And saying, hey, can we talk this out? What can I do? And again, a lot of kids have learned by going through my system just to figure out how to do that with others.
That's great. So they're rehearsing what it's like to have those conversations with a teacher, to advocate for their grade, for what they're learning, to feel safe not getting something yet, which is huge. Yeah. There's so many elements like in that gamification that for the students, and now I'm just realizing like for the teacher in a big way.
Yeah.
For you to have fun at work is huge.
Oh my God.
I tell my kids on the first day of school, like I have 3 priorities at work. Number 1 is I have to have fun at work because I've done a bunch of different jobs. There's a bunch of different jobs I could do that pay way more money.
Sure.
And if I'm not going to have any fun at work, like I got to go do something else.
Yeah.
My brain can't do it.
Yeah.
When it becomes tedious, and because if I'm not having fun, you guys are definitely not having fun.
Right.
And if you're not having fun, then why would you want to be here?
Yeah.
And then priority number 2, you have to not hate my class. You don't have to love it every day.
Right.
Like some days you're just going to hate life.
Right.
Or school. I need you to not hate my class. And then our 3rd priority is we learn science. And that can only happen when we do the first 2 first. And to think about like, man, well, how could I make my whole job a game? How could I come to school and be a dungeon master or lead whatever kind of adventure I want with the kids where it is just a game. It's a game with very specific targets and goals. Right. And when we reach those, we acknowledge it. And before we start out with the learning bout, we know what the goal is. But that's good teaching.
Yeah.
Where the kids understand the expectations, they know the learning target, they are metacognitive, they're thinking about their own learning, they learn how to learn autodidactically and access content without needing someone holding their hand.
Right.
And they learn how to know when they know it and when they don't know it.
Which is huge.
Huge.
So we're actually helping them become independent learners. And that's what the 21st century skills are all about. Collaboration, cooperation, independent learning. Knowing that you don't know it all, or knowing that you don't know it all and what to do about it. It's kind of huge.
Yeah.
Shoot, we know adults who don't know how to do that. If we can get our kids to do that, shoot.
That's true. I mean, we're talking about teachers. There's a lot of teachers that think they know it all.
Yeah.
And they probably at one point knew a lot.
Sure.
And still know a lot. But there's more to learn nonstop.
Right.
Nonstop. Because the kids, society, their culture, the technology that they have, and their different kinds of needs, it's all changing nonstop.
Right.
As soon as you catch up, the kids are already 2 steps ahead of where you thought you were headed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, kind of going back to even like the mental process. So, in some of my research, the conceptual framework I've built on, applied gamification is really looking at the cognitive aspects of what's happening in the student's mind as they're being gamified.
Okay.
So throwing out a compeller. Okay, so that compeller might be an incentive. Well, now they're like, all right, well, maybe they're thinking about, okay, do I engage or not? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to me to engage or not? Right? So there's that internal conflict going on. Once they decide that they do, okay, now they're gonna engage it, and then they expect that there is going to be some reward. Again, I know this is where quite a few educators might get some pushback and say, well, you know what? You can't just give them rewards for everything. Well, can you? Okay, so think about it. I know in life, there's a lot of things that we do that we're not necessarily rewarded for. Sure, again, we're adults, and so there might be intrinsic rewards coming to us later on. Mm-hmm. Our kids are not necessarily there mentally to see. Not all kids, not all kids can do this, but some of our kids just are not ready to see, all right, this is going to be good for me 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. They don't see it that far. They want to see it now. What am I going to get now? That is the adolescent brain.
Yes.
And so if we can kind of give them that in the ways in which that they like to receive rewards. So there's tangible versus intangible. Okay. And we've kind of talked a little bit about that, where, I've noticed that certain kids, they want the tangible, and they want the here and there. They go nuts over stickers or pencils or a little bouncy ball or a fidget spinner. They want that. And that's going to be great for them. Okay. Or, you know what? Hey, maybe they just want to listen to a little bit of music while they're doing independent work in your class. Okay. That's tangible. The intangible is what they can't see right now, but it's going to come to them later on. And it's something that they just really can't touch. Like maybe the homework pass, right? Maybe the extra credit, maybe, the improved grade, maybe like the sight spell. I'm going to see the test. Okay. It's intangible, but it's going to come later on down the road. Right? And some kids, they feed off of that. So depending on their personalities. And so once you've got them and you're giving them the rewards or the powers to make choices on how they're going to engage. So we're going back to that agency, the autonomy. There is the perception that they have power. And I say perception is because really, you as the game master, you really have already set the expectations. You know what the rewards are. You know how the system is going to work. So do they really have all the power? No. They just have the perception of power. And that's all they really need to really engage. And once they do, now they've got the buy-in. Once they see the rewards come through, are like, all right, I'm kind of liking this. I'm kind of like getting a little reward here or there. Okay. And so they're going to continue that cycle. And then what I have seen from students in my own experience is that then they will start to do tasks, or they will come up with their own ideas of how they're going to demonstrate their knowledge to me without me even giving them any prompt. They come up to me and say, hey, what do you think? I'm thinking about doing this, this, and this in this way. I love it. Go for it. Really? Yeah. You'll get points for it. Sure. Absolutely. Or, hey, I'm thinking about writing a song and then play it play it in the class, and I'm gonna bust out my guitar. Absolutely. I will give you 5 minutes for it. Are you kidding me? You're going to serenade me? Sure. Mm-hmm. Why not? I mean, I've seen amazing things that kids have happened. And that's where I see the switch from the extrinsic motivator, now it's to an intrinsic motivation. That they are coming to me to say, hey, I want to show you what I can do because I'm going to allow it. I'll let them do it. They're still manipulating my content. They're still working within my subject area and learning new stuff on the way. Because sometimes I don't give them the vocabulary that they want to do or use. They learn it on their own. And I think that it's possible to do that in every content area. Literally, I think it's really, really possible. So if you were to think about what you're going to do with your kids coming up in their next science lesson, I believe that we were chatting about, solar eclipses, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about what maybe your artists might be able to come up with to demonstrate that solar eclipse concept in ways that really hit home for them, and they're going to get jazzed about because, hey, I get to draw or I get to paint, and then they get to explain it to you. Cool. Awesome. Or what about, how about we think about your musicians? Okay. Maybe they come up with some kind of song, little ditty that is going to hit up this idea of solar eclipse. Or maybe they kind of dive deep into a little parody, or not parody, but they kind of figure out like, all right, I'm going to dive into all the different songs that deal with suns, right? Or, light and how light kind of interacts with us. Or I don't know. I'm just thinking like off the top of my head.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we can do. Absolutely. Sometimes we have to start that process with them because they don't know where to start. But once you give them ideas that are still tied to your content, and then they're like, oh yeah, I could see that, I could do that, and how about this, and then they add to the conversation, then I'm like, yes, now we're rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
And that's gold.
Absolutely. For them to be enthusiastic,
right,
about anything in school at 13 years old, 14 years old,
yeah,
I'll take it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you want to put together a song medley, or you want to absolutely art project.
Yep.
Yeah. Option, very UDL.
Yes. And that's the thing too. We're talking about differentiating our instruction, and and really being able to hit up the kids who do not necessarily, learn in one particular way. Let's give them options. Why not?
Yeah. It takes prep time. That's one thing.
Sure. It does. And so these are things that, need to be thought out prior to doing something like this. I'm not going to lie. It did take me a while to conceptualize my framework.
Sure.
However, once I started it and I, kind of went with it, it kind of ran itself after a while.
Yeah. Those ideas can come so much more easily, for me at least, when I don't have the pressures of the day-to-day grind of the teaching.
Right.
The teaching and the assessing. But a series of June coffee house mornings or afternoons at the pub, man, ideas just flow.
Right.
When, think about the kind of things that we're talking about, like, well, how would that be fun? How would that be structured? Can I sit here and finish this pint and sketch it out on a legal pad?
Right.
Hell yeah, I can. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I can bring my laptop and start making some of the resources.
I'd be happy to help you and, dive in some of those ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brain's just gonna When I look off like that, I find that I look up and to the left, which I don't know if, does that typically mean you're lying? Is that the way you look when you're lying?
It's either left or right or something like
One of
that.
those.
But I tend to look up when I'm thinking.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I had to tell Derek that when we were out to dinner the other day. Hey, if I look up, I'm not having a seizure or anything. My brain just had a bunch of ideas happen at the same time, and I'm trying to sort and file them. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I was thinking about this gamification framework applied to different content areas and what that would look like. And then I was thinking, man, what a shame that school gets ungamified. Because that's a pretty well documented phenomenon, is that kids tend to do pretty well in kindergarten, pretty well in first grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we get to second grade, third grade, and fourth grade, that's when the kids that do drop off academically start to drop off and stay at that level with at least some skills. So I know, like at my school, we've got a lot of kids that are struggling with literacy for whatever reason, number of reasons. But they get stuck at that level where they get disengaged from school, coincidentally, the same years that we're really emphasizing literacy in the classroom. So you have to stick to this curriculum that quote unquote curriculum, this reading book that we bought, or this reading program, and math and English language arts, and they really get hammered with it. I talked to a kindergarten teacher at a induction finale event recently, and she was talking about her kindergarten class, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's trickled into kindergarten." She said, "I don't ever get to do science. We barely do any of the social studies that you're supposed to do some with kindergarten, like for them to start learning about that kind of thing. Right. But nope, math, reading.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, is it at least reading that they want to read? And she was like, no, of course it's not. It's the things that so that's sad. If school, at least in the primary grades, used to be fully gamified all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was very fun, right?
It was at least that.
Definitely fun,
But I remember having charts with, even little charts with stars for different things, and whether they were behavioral or academic successes, and then, getting recognized for doing really well on a thing. And I gotta be honest, my memories of before my teens are really fuzzy.
It's okay.
But I do remember it being fun, and I remember some things being competitive, and that made learning fun. But if we're taking the fun out of school, I can see why kids are getting kind of halted at that developmental age.
Yeah. And yeah, it's sad to see. And that's where, the creative aspect of our job needs to come into play. Like, we need to be creative. We need to be able to bring that innovation into the classroom in order to, like, all right, how am I going to teach you some shit today? Right? And but in a way that you're going to walk away and say, that was cool. Wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
So I worked with another social science teacher, and he taught AP US history. Okay. And I loved his gamified system. So he taught 3 sections of AP US history. And again, very similar to the prior social science teacher, he had the 3 classes compete against each other. However, he did simulations. So his gamified system was based off of simulations. His entire class, each class had its own government. So you had a president, US president, you had a Congress, all of that, okay? And you had, voters and patriots and blah, blah, blah. It was crazy cool. And he had a blank map of the United States, just like a stencil kind of thing up there. And each time they would have tasks or assessments and all that good stuff, then you've got the leading class. They would be able to vote towards, all right, we're gonna take over Texas, and so then you would color Texas for that particular class. And then if you have rival classes, no, based on our particular governmental system and we're going to overtake this state from the other group. And that's where like you've had these literally rival governments fighting over the takeover of the United States. It was brilliant. And I took a picture of how the United States were just all like a mishmash of, okay, this group took over this. And it was just incredible to see that. Mm-hmm. And the kids got into it.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, no, you're not taking my state. They got into it, and it was awesome. It was really cool.
That's so cool. I can see how that would be a way more effective method of getting them to understand the intricacies of government,
right,
and all of the functions within, a complex governmental system. Because AP US stuff, that's government. That's like
right.
how does a complexly structured government work?
Right.
For them to have to do it, like, you are the government, do it.
Right.
Figure out what you can and can't do. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was super like creative, and he kept mentioning like at first it was a little bit of work, and not every kid wanted it or enjoyed it, but eventually the kids rallied around each other to incentivize one another. Like, no, we need to do this. We need to win. We need to be the ones on top kind of thing. We need to be able to take over the majority of the states kind of thing. And he says after a while, it just ran itself.
That's so awesome.
And the kids were like driving the learning.
That's so great.
Yeah.
From a college and career readiness standpoint.
Yeah.
Did you, when you were doing your undergrad,
yeah,
did you do a lot of study groups?
I did. Yeah, I think I did. I did a few. Yeah. When I wasn't sleeping through class or something. Yeah. No, I take that back. No, I did some study groups. Yeah, sure.
I did too. I remember the people in those study groups, like people that were always there. Friend Joe, another Joe Kanaiholo, Hawaiian dude. He was another non-traditional student like me, and also a former paramedic.
Cool.
And we didn't know about each other. We were both at the university having the same major, both being, middle age-ish, and both being paramedics. And we found out through a third party, like, hey, this girl Gabby, she's like, have you met Joe? No, who the heck is Joe?
Right.
And then we met, and we were just in different sections of the same classes, and then we ended up choosing our schedules together for successive classes and being in lectures together. But yeah, I remember all these study groups for like these different classes, microbiology, virology, whatever. We would get together and study in like I don't want to say gamified way, but it kind of was like we would set small goals for ourselves.
Right.
And we would, I guess, level up through the course of a study session or a series of study sessions. Like, we need to make sure we can do this. Then when we can do that, we need to make sure we understand this. And when we can answer that question,
right, we
know this deeper critical thinking question is probably going to be on the midterm. Then we need to make sure we can explain that. And so we're in the library with whiteboards and dry erase markers, okay, and working as a team. And I don't remember doing that in high school at all.
Right.
And so to do it, so I'd gotten used to working in a team in my career before I went back to college,
right,
later in life. But I'm pretty sure that at 18, 19, I didn't know how to do that, to study with a group of people.
Right.
So to get a community built in the classroom through this game where they're going to build those skills to be more successful, That seems like a big value.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. That they're going to take away outside of your class, and that's transfer skills, right? We want our kids to be, we want them to be motivated, of course, with our content, but we also want them to be independent. That we want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to be collaborative, cooperative. We also want them to be kind. We want them to know that there's much more than just themselves, that they need to be able to work with others. And I mean, all of those skills are very transferable across content areas. And those are things that are going to be utilized in the workforce. We want them to be able to, conflict resolute. How are you going to communicate with others? I mean, there's proper communication skills. These things come into play. And I think this is where, like when I said, when content is no longer king, I mean, really, educators have a big job on their hands, because they do need to teach to that whole child. They're teaching skills that is way bigger than just French or science. It's bigger than that. We're teaching them life.
How to be people.
How to be people. Right.
100%. Man. So if I'm a teacher that's been at it for at least a few years, and I've got a routine, I got a toolbox full of lessons and tools,
Yep.
and my engagement's really low, and I'm having behavior problems with kids,
Okay.
and I'm curious about this gamification thing. But what you just described with inventing my own fantasy world seems daunting.
Sure.
And I don't, I'm teaching summer school. I don't have that much time to invest.
Sure.
Or I've got a family, or whatever. I've just got life.
Yep.
What would be a good first step for somebody? Like if they're going to take one small step and then another small step toward progressively gamifying their content, what would that first step be?
So you can start with, let's say, just incentives, okay? And some of those incentives could be levels. And maybe you're going to just, I know for myself, I gamified my entire curriculum. Throughout the entire year, it was gamified at all times. But there's nothing wrong with, let's say, you know what? Hey, I'm just gonna gamify this one unit. This one unit, that's it. And maybe I'm going to, provide like 5 little levels instead of 10, which I did. I'm gonna do just 5. And these are the levels. And then there's the incentives that are linked to those, those levels. That's one way of kind of starting to do that process. Another thing is to start to incorporate, even if you didn't want to go like the leveling up piece, if you didn't want to do the incentives piece, okay? Simply recognizing that safe failure could definitely be a way that every teacher could do. Allowing retakes, allowing redos. Rethink what extra credit might look like for you. Those things are going to be huge. So just the incorporating the idea of safe failure, letting kids know that, hey, if you mess this up, it's going to be okay. But because there's the opportunity to do it again. It might not look the same.
Right.
So I'm not going to give you the same exact test. No. It's going to look a little different, but it's the same concepts, right? Or here's another one that I loved to do for assessments is, let's say on a quiz, you might have 3 different sections on your test, okay? So maybe your first section is, I know that we've talked about multiple choice, which really is short for multiple guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, there might be a few questions in that section that might be multiple guess. So you're kind of like slowly working them up to higher order thinking, to a little bit more complex concepts, right? So let's say in your first section, okay, here's a great way to gamify. Let's say you have 5 questions in your first section. Your minimum is they have to answer 4 of them. The 5th one is extra credit. Now, you don't tell them that, oh, you have to do 1 through 4 and 5 is extra credit. No, it's you choose which ones you're going to do. So you're incorporating the element of choice, giving them that agency to say, all right, well, I know I can do 1, 4, and 5. And maybe I kind of guess at the number 3, So, but you give them choice to do those that they are comfortable with, right? And then they can chance 1.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? Second section, maybe you're going to do something very similar, right? Maybe it's a little bit more complex of the concepts. But again, if you are saying, hey, here's my minimum criteria, I want 4 or I want 5 answers, but there are 6 or 7 options. Now you're giving them options to like, all right, I figured that one out, but I can do these 2 also, and then I can still offset what I screwed up, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's I use that a lot throughout my testing. And it was a great way for them to see, all right, I got this, but I didn't get that. But then, hey, just trying it, it's not going to kill me. Why not? I can just try it. So those were great little tips.
I love that. And it seems like those kinds of assessments, as the teacher, would give you a lot of useful data to go back and do intervention, to do any kind of reteaching you need to do with that kid. For them to demonstrate a concept in one way and one of those 5 answers in a way that you can then relate to the 2 that they weren't able to do. Well, see how you answered this? How does that apply to walk them through it?
Right. Or maybe you're going to offer, say, okay, well, section 1 is true and false. Section 2 is multiple choice. Section 3 is short answer. And then you can say, well, section 3 is worth more points than 1 and 2. So if you choose just to do 3, if that counts the same as doing 1 and 2. And so you're now giving them options like, well, I feel confident. I'm going to go for 3 and I'm going to get more points. And it feels like I'm doing less, right? So you're playing with their psychological, like, they're what they're seeing is like, oh, wait, section 3 is only 1. Section 1 and 2, maybe more, but it might seem a little easier for them because it's multiple choice or whatever. It doesn't always have to be that way, right? But if you're giving them the option to kind of make that choice, I don't know. It's also really cool to see kids take chances, which we do not really encourage a lot of in the educational system.
Sadly.
Because they're so afraid to get it wrong. And getting it wrong equates to punishment. And that punishment might come in bad grades, or, I'm going to get trouble, mom and dad. But again, if you set up your system is like, no, take a chance. I want you to take a chance, because there's multiple ways that you can earn and redeem yourself. This is not a one and done, right? If we set that off, oh my gosh, it's a very different way that we're educating our kids.
It's so foreign to them.
It is.
so foreign to them to have the opportunity to do a redo or a retake or multiples. Mm-hmm. And I've been offering that to my students now for, I changed my grading between quarter 1 and quarter 2. So now it's been 3 quarters of them having infinite retakes.
Okay.
Like, you can just come and do the assessment, a different version of it,
right,
testing the same understanding of the same content,
mm-hmm.
the same skills.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can do it as many times and literally until the end of the year, till I can't change your grade anymore.
Okay.
Like, I'll go back and change your transcript grade for quarter 1 in quarter 4 if you want to retest on those assessments, on those standards. And I still had kids come in at lunch this week and retake just small little diagnostics where they had to use a model to make some predictions about the moon phases, and they didn't get a couple kids would not get the score that they were hoping for, and they just looked downtrodden. I was like, okay, well, when do you want to take it again? What do you mean I can take it again? That was my retake. Like, I already took it twice. Yeah. Do you want to take it a third time?
Right.
Could you take your model home? Go learn it? Could you rewatch that video we watched in class? It's linked on your Google Classroom. Could you reread that article? Could you get better at it? Just talk about it with a friend that did get the score you want to get. Mm-hmm. Could you do that? Well, yeah, I bet I could. Okay, Tuesday then. I'll see you Tuesday.
Right.
And it's foreign. They have to compute. Like, well, what do you mean I can retake? Oh, what are you talking about?
Right. They think that you're. Are you punking me? What's going on?
Yeah. They really look at you like, are you serious, science man? Like,
right.
what is going on? And that is sad to me.
Yeah.
It's sad to me that, like you said, every test, if they're going to go be a teacher, they can take their CBEST infinite times to start, a credential program. They can, to get their content specific credential, they can take their CSETs infinite times.
Yep.
Like, they can redo their TPAs. If they don't pass induction, they can do extra stuff. Like, you can retake your driving test infinite times. Like, everything in life, you get redos. It's okay to screw up and make mistakes, but we're teaching them that if you're not ready on the test day because it's inconvenient for me otherwise, then that's it. You have failed. You're a failure.
Yeah.
And I like the language better. You're not there yet. Right. It's not as easy as you want it to be yet.
Right.
We can make it easier.
Right. We'll get there. And again, it's some kids are not. That's the other thing about traditional schooling, right? They're on a K-12 system. Mm-hmm. And we're expecting that every kid that comes through our door is going to increase their knowledge to a point where, all right, at the end of the year, they are ready to move on to the next set of, tasks and subjects. Not every kid moves along that same trajectory at the same speed. Mm-hmm. And we just need to, that's perhaps where, the traditional education system isn't really working well.
There's room to tune it up.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And so that's where if our educational system as a whole is not doing that for them, then if we ourselves as individual teachers can bring in small elements to allow for that differentiation to happen and let them kind of learn at their pace, mm-hmm. then we're just helping them succeed in a system that is kind of set, a very antiquated system that's set for them not to.
Yeah. So you can say fail.
I know, but right.
It's a naughty word.
I know, but, right. Unless if you're saying say failure, but yeah.
Yeah. To take risks.
Right.
To do dangerous things carefully.
Yes.
There's no learning without that.
Right. Absolutely.
You have to take a risk, and the risk might be, I don't learn it as fast as someone else.
Right. And that's okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. We've been at it for an hour and a half. You want to call it?
Let's call it.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
late. You have a drive.
Yes.
And we can always do it again if you want.
We can.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah. John, it was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it, Jake.
All right. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope that you've taken away something to think about, talk about, and share with other people. If you'd like to support this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, follow, review, like, and comment on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Jake Schulke. This has been the Grand Unified Podcast, a production of Lynx Learning Labs.